"Are those bruises?" the millionaire's daughter asked me. And as the janitor, I couldn't hold back tears. Those words echoed in my mind like a storm that wouldn't pass, like thunder rolling through empty corridors at 3 in the morning. The millionaire's daughter, a girl raised in silk and silver, saw something in me that no one else dared to mention. "Maybe you're finishing your rounds, checking the cameras, or closing the building while the world sleeps. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there?" I promise, today's story will touch your heart. My name is Ruth. I'm 58 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've been the janitor for the Wallingford family's sprawling penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., I drag myself out of my tiny studio apartment in Queens, riding the N train into the city while most of New York still dreams. The subway car smells like coffee and yesterday's rain, and I watch my reflection in the dark windows, wondering when I became this woman with tired eyes and calloused hands. I wear the same faded blue jumpsuit every day, the fabric soft from countless washings, but never quite clean enough to hide the stains of my work. My fingers are raw from scrubbing marble floors that cost more than my yearly salary, and my knees ache from years of kneeling to clean baseboards that most people never even notice. I keep my hair in a neat bun, secured with bobby pins I buy from the dollar store, trying to maintain some dignity in a world that treats me like furniture. The Wallingford penthouse spans the entire 42nd floor of a glass tower that pierces the Manhattan sky like a crystal needle. From their windows, you can see Central Park stretching like a green carpet, and beyond that, the Hudson River glinting in the morning light. Their fortune comes from investments in tech stocks and cryptocurrency. Mr. Wallingford made millions in Bitcoin when it first exploded, then diversified into traditional assets like real estate and bonds. The family's net worth runs into the hundreds of millions, a number so vast I can barely comprehend it. Mrs. Eleanor Wallingford is a woman in her early 50s who carries herself like royalty, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, her clothes impeccable. She speaks in clipped tones, as if every word costs her money she'd rather not spend. Mr. Charles Wallingford is a quiet man who seems lost in his own penthouse, always on his phone discussing stock portfolios and dividend yields. Their son Bradley is 22, fresh out of Columbia with an MBA and an attitude that could cut glass. And then there's Vivian, 14 years old, with her mother's sharp cheekbones, but her father's gentle eyes. She's the only one who ever looks at me like I'm a person instead of part of the cleaning equipment. That morning, this one morning that changed everything, I was in their kitchen at 6:15 a.m., rinsing crystal glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The kitchen is a cathedral of white marble and stainless steel, with a refrigerator that's bigger than my bathroom and a wine cooler that holds bottles worth thousands of dollars each. I was being extra careful, knowing that even the smallest chip could result in another lecture about being more mindful of expensive things. The bruises on my arms were particularly dark that day, purple and yellow marks that bloomed like poisonous flowers across my forearms, souvenirs from my weekend job at a warehouse in Long Island City. At 68 years old, I shouldn't be lifting boxes and loading trucks, but the Wallingford salary barely covers my rent and my son's college expenses back in Georgia. The warehouse work pays cash, no questions asked, and I need every dollar. I thought I was alone when Vivian appeared in the doorway, still in her silk pajamas, her dark hair tousled from sleep. She moved quietly across the marble floor in her bare feet, and I didn't notice her until she was standing right beside me. "Ruth," she said softly, and I nearly dropped the crystal glass I was holding. "Miss Vivian," I said, steadying myself, "you're up early." She was staring at my arms where my sleeves had rolled up while I worked. I quickly moved to pull them down, but she reached out gently, not touching, just gesturing toward the marks. "Are those bruises?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. In all my years of working for wealthy families, cleaning their homes and washing their clothes and picking up after their children, no one had ever asked about my bruises. No one had ever looked at me long enough to notice. I felt something crack inside my chest, like ice breaking on a frozen pond. My throat closed up and I couldn't speak for a moment. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a whisper. "It's nothing, miss. Just clumsy. That's all." But Vivian didn't look convinced. She had her father's eyes, dark brown and serious, and they seemed to see straight through my lies. "Do they hurt?" she asked, and that's when the tears came. Just 2 drops rolling down my cheeks before I could stop them. I turned away quickly, busying myself with the dishes, but the damage was done. Someone had seen me. Really seen me. "I should get back to work," I mumbled, but Vivian lingered for a moment longer before padding back down the hallway to her room. I stood in that gleaming kitchen, surrounded by wealth I'd never possess, and let myself cry for exactly 30 seconds. Then I dried my eyes, rolled down my sleeves, and got back to work. Because that's what women like me do. We endure, we survive, we keep moving. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, someone had acknowledged that I was more than just a pair of hands that cleaned and scrubbed and polished. Someone had seen that I could be hurt. That afternoon, as I mopped the marble floors of their grand foyer, I thought about my journey to this moment, how I'd left my small town in Georgia 23 years ago, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of hope. New York City was supposed to be my chance at something better, a place where a woman could reinvent herself and build a life worth living. Instead, I'd spent more than 2 decades cleaning up after other people's dreams. My son Marcus was only 8 when we came to New York. His father had left us when Marcus was 3, disappearing into the night like smoke, leaving behind only child support checks that came sporadically and eventually stopped altogether. I told myself I was being strong, being independent, giving my boy opportunities he'd never have in our small Georgia town. But what kind of opportunities? Marcus is 25 now, working as a teacher's aide in Atlanta, struggling to pay off his student loans. I sent him money every month for years, working extra jobs and skipping meals to make sure he could finish college. He graduated with a degree in education and dreams of making a difference, but the salary barely covers his expenses. He calls me every Sunday, and I can hear the worry in his voice when he asks how I'm doing. I always tell him I'm fine, that the Wallingfords are good to me, that I'm saving money for my retirement, all lies wrapped in love. Because what mother wants her son to know she's breaking herself to stay afloat? "Mom, you sound tired," he said last Sunday, and I had to turn away from the phone so he wouldn't hear me crying. "Just busy, baby," I told him. "You know how it is." But he doesn't know how it is. He doesn't know that I wake up at 4:30 every morning with pain shooting through my lower back. He doesn't know that I often eat nothing but crackers and peanut butter for dinner because I've sent him my grocery money. He doesn't know that sometimes, when I'm alone in that big penthouse, I sit on their expensive sofa for just a moment and pretend it's mine. The Wallingfords pay me $18 an hour for 40 hours a week, which sounds reasonable until you calculate what that means in New York City. After taxes, it's barely $2,400 a month. My studio apartment in Queens costs $600, leaving me $800 for everything else: food, utilities, MetroCard, phone bill, and whatever money I can send to Marcus. That's why I work weekends at the warehouse. That's where I got the bruises. The warehouse job is brutal. Lifting boxes that weigh 50 pounds or more, loading them onto trucks in all kinds of weather. The supervisor is a man named Tony, who treats the older workers like we're disposable. When I move too slowly or ask for help with a particularly heavy load, he makes comments about maybe it's time I found work more suited to my age. Last Saturday, I was loading cases of auto parts when I lost my grip. The boxes tumbled down on me, the corners catching my arms and leaving those purple marks that Vivian noticed. I wanted to quit right then, to walk away and never come back. But I needed that $200 cash payment. I needed it to keep my life from completely falling apart. So I picked myself up, ignored Tony's muttered complaints about clumsy old women, and finished my shift. The small humiliations were constant, like paper cuts that never quite heal. At the Wallingfords, I was invisible most of the time, which was almost a mercy. When they did notice me, it was usually because something was wrong, like the morning I spilled coffee on their Persian rug. It was an accident. I was carrying too much at once, trying to be efficient, when I tripped over the corner where the rug met the hardwood floor. The coffee spread across the intricate pattern like a brown stain on a masterpiece. Mrs. Wallingford appeared instantly, as if she had radar for domestic disasters. "Ruth," she said, her voice sharp as a knife, "what have you done?" "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Wallingford," I stammered, already on my knees with paper towels, trying to blot up the mess. "It was an accident. I'll clean it right away." She stood over me, her designer heels clicking impatiently on the marble floor. "This rug is worth more than you make in 6 months," she said coldly. "We had it shipped from Iran. It's irreplaceable." I kept blotting, my face burning with shame. "I understand, ma'am. I'll do everything I can to fix it." "You'll pay for professional cleaning," she said, "and if it's damaged permanently, we'll have to discuss compensation." The professional cleaning cost $400. That was 2 weeks of warehouse shifts, 2 weeks of my body screaming in protest as I lifted boxes and loaded trucks. I paid it without complaint, even though it meant eating nothing but rice and beans for a month, but it was more than the money. It was the way she looked at me, like I was stupid and careless, like I'd ruined her rug on purpose. It was the way she talked about me to her husband that evening when she thought I was out of earshot. "I don't know why we keep her," Mrs. Wallingford said. "She's getting old, and old people make mistakes." "She's reliable," Mr. Wallingford replied, not looking up from his tablet where he was checking his cryptocurrency portfolio. "And she's cheap." Cheap. That's what I was to them. Not hard-working or dedicated or loyal. Just cheap. The missed payments made everything worse. Twice this year, the Wallingfords forgot to pay me on time. The first time, Mrs. Wallingford was traveling in Europe, looking at investment properties, and she let my paycheck slide for 3 weeks. When I finally gathered the courage to mention it, she acted like I was being pushy. "Oh, Ruth, you should have said something sooner," she said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "I've been so busy with the London property acquisition. Charles is putting together a real estate investment portfolio worth several $1,000,000, and these international transactions require so much attention." She wrote me a check right then, but I could tell she was annoyed by the interruption. To her, my rent and groceries were trivial concerns compared to her multi-million-dollar real estate deals. The second time, there was no excuse at all. The payment was just 4 days late, but those 4 days meant overdraft fees at my bank and a humiliating conversation with my landlord. When I asked about it, Mrs. Wallingford's sister Diane was visiting, and she laughed. "Maybe if you managed your money better, a few days wouldn't matter," Diane said, stirring her coffee with a silver spoon. "Poor people always make everything into a crisis." Poor people. As if being poor were a character flaw instead of a circumstance. Mrs. Wallingford didn't defend me. She just handed me the check and changed the subject to her newest dividend-paying stocks. But the worst humiliation came 3 months ago, when I caught a nasty flu that kept me bedridden for 5 days. I tried to work through it the first day, dragging myself to the penthouse with a fever and body aches, but I was so weak I had to sit down every few minutes. Mrs. Wallingford found me resting in their guest bathroom, my forehead pressed against the cool marble wall. "Ruth, you look terrible," she said, but not with concern, with annoyance. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I have the flu," but I didn't want to miss work. "Well, you can't work like this," she said. "Go home and don't come back until you're better." I went home and spent 5 days in my tiny apartment, too sick to even make soup. When I returned, Mrs. Wallingford docked my pay for the missed days. "We can't pay you for time you didn't work," she explained, as if I'd taken a vacation instead of nearly passing out from fever. Her sister Diane was there again, and she made it worse. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself, you wouldn't get sick so often," she said with a sneer. "When I was working, I never missed a day for illness. It's all about personal discipline. Personal discipline. As if eating nothing but peanut butter sandwiches because I couldn't afford better food was a choice I made for fun. The accusation that hurt the most came from Mrs. Wallingford's cousin Rebecca, a woman in her 40s who visited every few months. She had this way of watching me work, following me with her eyes like I might steal something when she wasn't looking. One afternoon, I was dusting Mr. Wallingford's home office when Rebecca cornered me. "You know, Ruth," she said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than my car, "I've noticed how you look at Charles." I stopped dusting, confused. "Ma'am?" "The way you watch him. The way you find excuses to be in whatever room he's in." Her voice was casual, but her eyes were cold. "It's inappropriate for someone in your position." The accusation hit me like a slap. "I don't know what you mean, ma'am. I'm just trying to do my job." "Are you?" She leaned forward. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you're trying to get his attention." A woman your age throwing herself at a married man? It's pathetic. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I avoided Mr. Wallingford whenever possible, that I timed my cleaning around his schedule so we'd rarely be in the same room. But what was the point? She'd already decided I was predatory, desperate, pathetic. "I would never," I started. "Of course you'd deny it," Rebecca cut me off. "Just remember that we're watching you. All of us." That night, I went home and looked at myself in my small bathroom mirror. I saw a 58-year-old woman with gray roots showing in her dark hair, lines around her eyes from squinting in harsh cleaning product fumes, hands that were red and cracked from constant washing. I tried to see what Rebecca saw, some desperate woman throwing herself at her employer. All I saw was exhaustion. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was cleaning the grand staircase, polishing the mahogany banister that curved up to the second floor like a wooden ribbon. The sunrise was streaming through the massive windows, casting everything in golden light, and for a moment I paused to appreciate the beauty. That's when it happened. My hand, slick from furniture polish, slipped on the banister. I lost my balance and reached out instinctively to steady myself. My elbow caught a crystal vase that sat on a small table at the landing, one of Mrs. Wallingford's precious antiques from some auction in Switzerland. The vase fell in slow motion, tumbling through the golden morning light like a falling star. When it hit the marble floor, it shattered into 1,000 pieces that scattered like frozen tears across the pristine stone. The sound echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Mrs. Wallingford appeared at the top of the stairs in her silk robe, her face a mask of fury. "What have you done?" she whispered, and somehow the whisper was more terrifying than shouting would have been. I dropped to my knees immediately, trying to gather up the pieces with my bare hands. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. It was an accident. I was just—" "That vase was $18,000, she said, walking slowly down the stairs. "It was from the estate of a Czech nobleman, one of a kind. $18,000, more than half my yearly salary." I kept picking up pieces, cutting my fingers on the sharp edges, my blood mixing with the crystal shards. "I'll pay for it," I said, though we both knew it was impossible. "I'll work extra shifts, You'll pay for it?" Mrs. Wallingford laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Ruth, you can barely afford to pay your own rent. How exactly will you replace an irreplaceable antique?" I had no answer. I knelt there in my blue jumpsuit, surrounded by broken crystal and broken dreams, bleeding onto marble that cost more than my car. That's when I saw it. The family photo on the mantelpiece. Mr. and Mrs. Wallingford, Bradley, and Vivian, all smiling in their perfect clothes in front of their perfect fireplace. A family complete without me, despite everything I'd done for them. Despite 8 years of early mornings and aching knees and swallowed pride. What would happen if I just walked away? The thought came from nowhere, dangerous and liberating. Mrs. Wallingford was still talking about the vase, about responsibility and consequences, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was imagining walking out that door and never coming back, never again kneeling on cold marble floors, never again pretending not to hear their cruel comments, never again apologizing for existing in their space. The fantasy lasted exactly 30 seconds before reality crashed back down. I needed this job. Marcus needed the money I sent him. My landlord needed his rent. The warehouse supervisor might fire me any day for being too slow, too old, too tired. I finished cleaning up the crystal in silence while Mrs. Wallingford calculated how much would be deducted from my paychecks. It would take me 8 months to pay off that vase, 8 months of warehouse shifts and skipped meals and sleepless nights. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment and really looked at my life. The apartment had one room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. The bathroom was so small, I had to step into the tub to close the door. My bed was a futon that never quite unfolded properly, leaving me sleeping at an angle that made my back ache even more. But it was mine, the one space in the world where I didn't have to apologize for breathing. I opened the small drawer beside my bed and pulled out a letter I'd written 6 months earlier, but never sent. It was addressed to Marcus, telling him the truth about my situation, about the bruises and the missed meals and the way the Wallingfords treated me like disposable furniture. "Dear Marcus," it began, "there are things I need to tell you about my life here, things I've hidden because I wanted you to be proud of your mother. But I'm drowning, baby. I'm working myself to death to feed a machine that doesn't care if I live or die." I read the letter twice, then tore it into small pieces and flushed them down the toilet. Some truths are too heavy to share. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I took out my old suitcase from the closet and set it on my bed, unopened. Just looking at it was an act of rebellion. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a life somewhere else. Maybe a small town in North Carolina where the cost of living was manageable and people still said good morning to strangers. Maybe a job at a school or library, somewhere I could use my mind instead of just my hands. Maybe a little apartment with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and herbs. The fantasy was so vivid I could almost taste the sweet tea and feel the southern sunshine on my face. But morning came, as it always does, and I put the suitcase back in the closet. I put on my blue jumpsuit and took the N train into Manhattan, because that's what women like me do. We dream at night and work during the day. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine humiliations and small kindnesses. Mrs. Wallingford mentioned the broken vase every few days, reminding me how much it was costing her to keep me employed. Bradley started leaving bigger messes in his room, as if testing how much he could get away with. Mr. Wallingford barely acknowledged my existence, which was almost a relief. But Vivian was different after that morning in the kitchen. She started saying good morning when she saw me, actually making eye contact instead of looking through me. Once, she left a chocolate chip cookie on the kitchen counter with a note that said, "Thank you for everything you do." It was a small thing, but it made me cry in the supply closet for 5 minutes. The first sign of change came on a Wednesday in November. Mrs. Wallingford called me into the living room, where she was sitting with her laptop, reviewing what looked like financial statements. "Ruth," she said without looking up, "we need to discuss your schedule." My heart sank. "Ma'am?" "Charles's Bitcoin investments have been performing exceptionally well," she continued, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. "Our cryptocurrency portfolio is now worth nearly $50 million, and we're considering expanding our real estate holdings." I waited, not sure where this was going. "What that means for you," she said, finally looking at me, "is that we're going to be entertaining more frequently. Business associates, potential investment partners. I'll need you to work longer hours, including some weekends. More hours. More time away from my own life. More time on my knees scrubbing floors and polishing surfaces for people who saw me as part of the decor." "Of course, ma'am," I heard myself saying. "Whatever you need." But something inside me was screaming. A voice I'd been ignoring for years, getting louder and more insistent. "What about what you need?" That weekend, instead of working at the warehouse, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called in sick and spent Saturday walking through Central Park. The leaves were turning gold and red, and families were out enjoying the crisp autumn air. I sat on a bench near the reservoir and watched joggers and dog walkers and couples holding hands. For 3 hours, nobody asked me to clean anything or apologize for anything or explain myself. I was just a woman sitting on a bench, watching the world go by. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. That evening, I called Marcus. Not on Sunday, our usual day, but whenever I wanted to hear his voice. "Mom," he answered, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I just wanted to hear how you're doing," I said, settling onto my futon with a cup of tea. We talked for an hour about his students and his girlfriend Sarah and his plans to propose next Christmas. He sounded happy, genuinely happy, and I realized I hadn't heard that joy in his voice in years. "Mom," he said as we were getting ready to hang up, "you sound different today. Lighter somehow." "Do I?" "Yeah, it's nice. You've seemed so tired lately when we talk." After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment and realized something profound. I had been tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired, not just from the physical work, but from carrying other people's priorities while ignoring my own needs completely. The second sign of change came the following Tuesday. I was in Mr. Wallingford's office, dusting his collection of financial awards and certificates, when I overheard a phone conversation that made my blood run cold. He was talking to someone about their household expenses, probably their accountant, and I heard him say, "The cleaning woman is getting expensive. $18 an hour plus the money we're deducting for that vase she broke. Maybe it's time to find someone younger." Someone younger. Someone cheaper. Someone more disposable. I kept dusting, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding. 8 years of loyal service, and they were discussing replacing me like a broken appliance. That afternoon, while I was organizing Mrs. Wallingford's walk-in closet, a space larger than my entire apartment, I found something that changed everything. Hidden behind a row of designer purses was a manila folder filled with financial documents, tax forms, investment statements, and what looked like records of cash payments to various service providers. I almost put it back without looking, but something made me hesitate. The folder was labeled Household Deductions, Cash Payments. My hands trembling, I opened it and found detailed records going back 3 years. Payments to their doorman, their driver, their part-time gardener, and me. But the amounts listed for my payments were wrong. Way wrong. According to these documents, the Wallingfords were claiming they paid me $25 an hour for 50 hours a week, plus bonuses and benefits. They were taking tax deductions for nearly $70,000 a year in payments to me. But I was only receiving $18 an hour for 40 hours a week, with no bonuses and no benefits. They were claiming deductions for money they weren't actually paying me. It was tax fraud. They were stealing from the government and using me as their cover. I stood in that closet, surrounded by shoes that cost more than my monthly rent, holding evidence that could destroy them. My heart pounded so hard, I thought they might hear it in the next room. This was it. This was my power. For the first time in 8 years, I had something they wanted more than they wanted to get rid of me. I had their secret, their vulnerability, their crime spelled out in black and white. I carefully photographed every page with my phone, then put the folder back exactly where I found it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those documents, about what they meant. The Wallingfords had built their fortune on investments and smart financial planning, but they were cheating on their taxes using my name. If the IRS found out, they could face massive fines, penalties, even criminal charges. I thought about calling the IRS hotline anonymously. I thought about confronting the Wallingfords directly. I thought about using the information to negotiate better treatment, higher pay, basic human respect. But mostly, I thought about walking away. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Mrs. Wallingford announced that they were hosting a dinner party for potential investors in a new cryptocurrency venture. 12 guests, including some very wealthy people from the financial district, would be coming to discuss putting together a multi-million-dollar investment fund. "I need everything to be perfect, Ruth," she said, her voice sharp with stress. "These people control hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. One small mistake could cost us the entire deal." The pressure was enormous. I spent 3 days preparing, polishing every surface until it gleamed, arranging flowers, setting the table with their finest china and crystal. On the night of the party, I arrived early to make final preparations. The guests began arriving at 7 o'clock, men and women in expensive suits, talking about stock options and Bitcoin futures and real estate portfolios. I served drinks and appetizers in my crisp white uniform, invisible as always. That's when I heard something that made my blood boil. Mrs. Wallingford was talking to a woman who apparently ran a private wealth management firm. They were discussing household staff, and the woman was complaining about how hard it was to find good help these days. "We've been lucky with our cleaning woman," Mrs. Wallingford said, accepting a glass of wine that probably cost more than I made in a day. "She's been with us for years, very reliable, very grateful for the work." "How much do you pay her?" the wealth manager asked. Mrs. Wallingford smiled. "$25 an hour, plus bonuses. It's expensive, but you have to invest in quality staff. She's like family to us." Like family. The woman who docked my pay when I got sick, who made me pay for accidents, who talked about replacing me when she thought I couldn't hear, was telling strangers I was like family. And she was lying about my salary, making herself look generous while pocketing the difference for tax purposes. I finished serving the appetizers and retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking with rage. For 8 years, I had swallowed their insults and accepted their crumbs while they lived like royalty off investments and tax fraud. They had stolen my dignity, my health, my time with my son. And now they were stealing money using my name. That's when I made my decision. I slipped into Mr. Wallingford's office during the main course, while everyone was distracted by conversation about emerging markets and cryptocurrency regulations. I knew exactly where he kept his spare laptop, the one he used for personal business, separate from his main computer that might be monitored by his company. It took me less than 5 minutes to find what I was looking for: detailed records of their tax filings going back 5 years, including all the fraudulent deductions they'd been claiming for household staff payments. I copied everything to a flash drive I'd bought that afternoon, then returned to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The party ended around midnight. The guests left full of wine and optimism about their potential cryptocurrency investments, completely unaware that their hosts were tax cheats who built their fortune on the backs of people they treated like garbage. After I finished cleaning up, Mrs. Wallingford approached me in the kitchen. "Ruth, thank you for all your hard work tonight," she said, and for a moment she almost sounded sincere. "The dinner was perfect. You really helped us make a good impression." "You're welcome, ma'am," I said, hanging up my apron. "I hope you understand how important tonight was for us," she continued. "Charles's cryptocurrency investments have been incredibly successful. We're worth nearly $100 million now, but we're always looking to expand. Connections like these could set us up for life. $100 million, and they were worried about paying me a living wage." "I understand, ma'am." She smiled, the kind of smile rich people give when they think they're being gracious. "You've been such a loyal part of our family, Ruth. I want you to know we appreciate everything you do." Family. There was that word again. I went home that night and sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the flash drive that contained evidence of their fraud. I thought about Marcus, about his teaching salary and student loans and dreams of starting a family with Sarah. I thought about my aching back and my warehouse bruises and my tiny apartment that felt like a cell. I thought about 8 years of being invisible, 8 years of apologizing for existing, 8 years of being grateful for scraps from people who wiped their feet on my dignity every single day. At 3 a.m., I made copies of everything and mailed them to the IRS. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter, like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. I put on my blue jumpsuit one last time and took the N train into Manhattan, but something had changed. I wasn't just Ruth the janitor anymore. I was Ruth the woman who had fought back. Mrs. Wallingford was in the kitchen when I arrived, reading financial news on her tablet while drinking coffee from a cup that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Good morning, Ruth," she said without looking up. "Good morning, ma'am." I started my usual routine, emptying wastebaskets, wiping down surfaces, pretending to be invisible. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a woman with power, even if she didn't know it yet. The call came 2 weeks later. I was dusting the living room when Mrs. Wallingford's phone rang. She answered with her usual crisp, "Eleanor Wallingford speaking." But her voice changed quickly. "What do you mean, an audit?" she said, walking toward the windows that overlooked Central Park. "We file our taxes properly every year." There was a long pause while she listened. "Household staff discrepancies? I don't understand what you're talking about." Another pause. Her face was getting paler. "Next Thursday? But that's impossible. Charles is in London closing a deal on a property investment worth $8 million. Can't we reschedule?" I kept dusting, moving slowly so I could hear every word. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll be there. But I want our attorney present." She hung up and stood staring out at the park for a long moment. Then she turned and saw me watching. "Ruth," she said, and her voice was different now, uncertain. "How long have you been working for us?" 8 years, ma'am. "And we pay you how much per hour?" I could have lied. I could have protected her, protected them, the way I'd been protecting them for years by staying silent about their cruel treatment. Instead, I told the truth. $18 an hour, ma'am. 40 hours a week, no benefits. The color drained completely from her face. That evening, I was preparing to leave when Mr. Wallingford called me into his office. He was sitting behind his massive desk, surrounded by financial documents and looking older than I had ever seen him. "Ruth," he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from him, "we need to talk." I sat down and folded my hands in my lap, waiting. "There seems to be some confusion about your employment here," he said carefully. "Some discrepancies that the IRS wants to discuss with us." "I see. Ruth, you've been with our family for a long time. We consider you, well, we consider you family." There was that word again. Family. "We're hoping," he continued, "that we can work together to clear up any misunderstandings. You know how complicated tax law can be." I looked at him sitting in his leather chair in his expensive suit, asking me to help him cover up his crime. 8 years of treating me like dirt, and now he needed me. "What kind of misunderstanding, sir?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it's possible that our accountant made some errors in how he reported your wages. You know how these financial professionals can be. They're dealing with such large sums, Bitcoin portfolios worth millions, real estate investments, stock dividends. Sometimes the smaller details get confused. Smaller details, that's what I was to him." "I understand, sir." "Good," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I knew you would. You're a reasonable woman, Ruth. A loyal woman." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "This is a bonus," he said, sliding it across the desk. $5,000 as a token of our appreciation for your years of service and your understanding about this tax situation." $5,000. A fortune to me. Pocket change to him. I picked up the envelope and looked inside. 50 $100 bills, crisp and new. "That's very generous, sir," I said. "There's more where that came from," he said, leaning forward. "If this audit goes smoothly, if there are no complications, we'd be happy to increase your salary, maybe to $25 an hour with benefits." $25 an hour, the amount they'd been claiming to pay me all along. "And if I don't help you?" I asked quietly. His friendly expression flickered. "Well, Ruth, I'd hate to see you lose your job over a misunderstanding, especially at your age. It would be very difficult for you to find other employment." There it was, the threat underneath the bribe. I stood up, still holding the envelope of money. "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course," he said, his smile returning. "Take all the time you need. But Ruth, I hope you remember everything we've done for each other over the years. Everything we've done for each other, as if it had been mutual. As if I hadn't been giving and giving while they took and took." That night I sat in my apartment with the $5,000 spread across my kitchen table, more money than I'd ever held at one time, enough to pay off my credit cards, to send Marcus something extra, to buy myself a decent winter coat for the first time in 5 years. All I had to do was lie for them. All I had to do was help them cover up their fraud and continue treating me like garbage for however many years I had left. I thought about Marcus, about the pride in his voice when he talked about his students. He was making a difference in the world, helping kids learn and grow and become better people. What would he think if he knew his mother had chosen money over truth? I thought about my own father, who died when I was 12, but who always told me that a person's word was the only thing that couldn't be taken away. "Ruth," he used to say, "you can lose your money and your house and your job, but if you lose your integrity, you've lost everything that matters." At 2 a.m., I made my decision. I took the $5,000 and walked 6 blocks to the nearest police station. I handed the money to the desk sergeant and explained that it was a bribe in connection with an ongoing IRS investigation. Then I went home and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I put on a different outfit, my best dress instead of the blue jumpsuit, and took the train to the IRS office in Lower Manhattan. I spent 3 hours telling them everything. About the fake pay records, about the tax deductions, about the bribe attempt. I gave them copies of all the documents I'd photographed, explained exactly how the fraud had been structured and how long it had been going on. The IRS agent, a woman about my age named Sandra Clark, listened with growing amazement. "Mrs. Washington," she said when I finished, "you understand that your testimony could result in serious criminal charges against the Wallingfords?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're willing to testify in court if necessary?" "Yes, ma'am." She studied my face for a moment. "Can I ask why? After 8 years, why come forward now?" I thought about that question, about Vivian asking about my bruises, about Marcus's pride in making a difference, about my father's words about integrity. "Because they asked me to lie," I said finally, "and I'm tired of being invisible." 3 days later, federal agents raided the Wallingford penthouse. I wasn't there to see it. I'd called in sick that morning claiming a family emergency, but I heard about it from the doorman when I came to collect my final paycheck. "They took boxes and boxes of stuff," he told me, shaking his head. "Computer equipment, financial records, everything. Mrs. Wallingford was crying, and Mr. Wallingford kept shouting about calling lawyers." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, certainly, but also sadness. For 8 years, that penthouse had been my second home, even if it hadn't always been a happy one. Mrs. Wallingford called me that evening. "Ruth," she said, and her voice was different now, broken. "I need to ask you something." "Yes, ma'am?" Did you speak to the IRS?" I could have lied. Even then, even after everything, some part of me wanted to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. "Yes, ma'am," I said instead. I did. There was a long silence. "Why?" she whispered. "After everything we've done for you, why would you betray us like this?" Betray them. As if my loyalty had been something they'd earned instead of something they'd demanded. Mrs. Wallingford, I said, you've been stealing money using my name for years. You've treated me like garbage, cheated the government, and then asked me to lie to cover it up. I didn't betray you. You betrayed yourselves. She started to say something else, but I hung up. 2 weeks later, the story broke in the New York Times. Cryptocurrency millionaire charged with tax fraud. The article detailed how Charles Wallingford had claimed hundreds of thousands in fraudulent deductions related to household staff, using the scheme to avoid paying taxes on his Bitcoin gains and real estate investments. Marcus called me immediately. "Mom, I saw the news," he said. "Wasn't that the family you worked for?" "Yes, baby." "The article says a household employee came forward as a whistleblower. That wasn't you, was it?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, Marcus, that was me." Silence. Then, "Mom, are you okay? Are you safe?" "I'm fine, baby. Better than fine." "I'm so proud of you," he said, and I started to cry. "I'm so proud of you for standing up to them." "Are you really?" "Mom, you took down millionaires who were cheating the system. You're like a superhero." A superhero. Me, Ruth Washington, 58-year-old former janitor from Queens. The legal proceedings took months. The Wallingfords hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, Charles pled guilty to tax evasion and was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in back taxes, penalties, and interest. Eleanor received probation and community service, but their fortune was essentially wiped out. They had to sell the penthouse, the vacation homes, most of their investments. Bradley dropped out of business school and got a job delivering food. The family that had once been worth nearly $100 million was reduced to middle-class status almost overnight. I felt sorry for Vivian most of all. She was just a kid who'd been kind to me, and now her whole world was falling apart because of her parents' greed. But I didn't regret what I'd done. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen truth over convenience, justice over security. The IRS gave me a whistleblower award, a percentage of the money they recovered from the Wallingfords. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to change my life. I paid off all my debts, moved to a nice one-bedroom apartment in Astoria with a kitchen big enough for a proper dining table. I quit the warehouse job and enrolled in a community college program to become a certified accounting assistant. At 58, I was finally learning to use my mind instead of just my hands. Marcus came to visit for Thanksgiving, bringing Sarah and her engagement ring. We cooked dinner together in my new kitchen, and I told them stories about growing up in Georgia that I'd never shared before. Stories about my father's integrity, about my mother's strength, about the dreams I'd put aside to survive. "Mom," Marcus said as we were cleaning up, "I need to tell you something." "What's that, baby?" "The money you used to send me every month, I knew you couldn't afford it. I tried to tell you to stop, but you wouldn't listen." I stopped washing dishes and looked at him. "I've been saving most of it," he continued. "I've got almost $15,000 in an account I was planning to give back to you when you retired." $15,000. Money I'd denied myself food and heat to send him, money he'd been saving to give back to me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I knew if I tried to give it back, you'd just send it again. You're too stubborn and too generous for your own good." Sarah laughed. "He gets that from you, Ruth, the stubborn part and the generous part." That night, after they went to bed in my guest room, I had a guest room now, I sat in my living room and thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 8 years of invisible labor and visible bruises, of swallowed pride and stolen dignity. But also 8 years of quiet strength, of choosing my family over myself, of enduring what couldn't be changed and changing what couldn't be endured. I thought about Vivian's question. Are those bruises? The moment when someone finally saw me as a person who could be hurt instead of a machine that cleaned and served and apologized. The bruises were gone now. The ones on my arms had faded months ago, and the ones on my heart were slowly healing too. 6 months after the trial ended, I was leaving my accounting class when I saw a familiar figure waiting by the subway entrance. It was Vivian, taller now, her dark hair longer, but still with those serious brown eyes that had first seen through my invisible armor. "Ruth?" she said tentatively. "Hello, Miss Vivian. I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay." We walked to a nearby coffee shop and sat across from each other at a small table. She looked older than her 15 years, like someone who'd learned hard lessons too young. "I wanted to apologize," she said, stirring her hot chocolate with a plastic spoon, "for what my parents did to you, for how they treated you all those years." "You don't need to apologize for their actions," I told her. "You were just a child." "I knew they were mean to you sometimes," she said, looking down at her cup. "I should have said something." "Vivian, you did say something. You asked about my bruises. You were the only person in 8 years who saw that I could be hurt." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry it took me so long." "Don't be sorry. Be proud that you noticed it all." A lot of adults never learn to see the people who serve them. We talked for an hour about her new school, her parents' divorce, her plans for college. She was going to study social work, she told me, because she wanted to help people who felt invisible. "Like you did," she said. "Like I was," I corrected her. "I'm not invisible anymore." As I walked home that evening, I thought about the question that had started it all. Are those bruises? 3 simple words that had cracked open years of accumulated pain and silence. Sometimes the most powerful questions are the ones that dare to acknowledge what everyone else pretends not to see. I'm 60 now, working part-time as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit that helps immigrant families navigate the American financial system. My clients are mostly women like me, hardworking, overlooked, carrying more than their share while being grateful for less than they deserve. Last month, I helped a woman named Anna discover that her employer had been stealing her overtime pay for 3 years. When I showed her the evidence, she asked me the same question I'd asked myself in that marble kitchen. What would happen if I just walked away? "You don't have to walk away," I told her. "You can walk toward something better." She filed a complaint with the Department of Labor and recovered $12,000 in stolen wages. But more importantly, she learned that her time had value, that her dignity was not negotiable, that being invisible was a choice and not a life sentence. The lesson isn't that we should all become whistleblowers or that every workplace injustice will have a happy ending. The lesson is simpler and harder. We have to learn to see ourselves as worthy of being seen. I still live in Queens, though in a nicer neighborhood now. I have a small garden on my fire escape, where I grow tomatoes and herbs. I call Marcus every Sunday, but now our conversations are about his wedding plans and my college classes instead of money and worry. Sometimes I take the train into Manhattan and walk past the building where the Wallingfords used to live. There's a new family in the penthouse now, and I wonder if they treat their staff with respect or if they're just another version of the same old story. The doorman is the same. Roberto, who always remembered my name, even when the family I worked for sometimes forgot it. When he sees me, he smiles. "Ruth, you look good, happy." "I am happy, Roberto." "You hear what happened to them? The Wallingfords?" I nod. "I heard." "Karma," he says, shaking his head. "What goes around, comes around." Maybe. Or maybe sometimes you have to be your own karma, your own justice, your own voice in a world that would prefer you stay silent. As I write this, I'm sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee and a view of the East River. It's early morning, but I don't have to be anywhere until noon. I'm not rushing to catch a train to scrub someone else's floors or apologize for existing in their space. I think about all the women like me working in invisible jobs for people who see them as furniture. The nannies and housekeepers and home health aides who give their best years to other people's families while their own children grow up in phone calls and missed holidays. I want to tell them what I learned. You are not furniture. You are not disposable. Your bruises matter, whether they're on your body or your soul. Someone asked me recently if I regret speaking up, if I ever wish I'd just taken the bribe and kept quiet? The question surprised me because the answer was so clear. I regret the 8 years I spent being invisible. I regret the meals I skipped and the dignity I swallowed and the way I taught my son that love means sacrificing yourself completely for other people's comfort. But I don't regret finding my voice. I don't regret choosing truth over security or justice over convenience. I don't regret becoming visible. The woman who once knelt on marble floors picking up crystal shards while rich people discussed her expendability is gone. In her place is someone who knows her worth. Someone who refuses to be grateful for crumbs. Someone who understands that being seen is a basic human right. The bruises are gone, but the strength remains. Last week I got a letter from the IRS informing me that my whistleblower case had been formally closed and thanking me for my service to the country. They used that word, service, the same word the Wallingfords had twisted to mean servitude. But real service isn't about being invisible. Real service is about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something, even when it's scary, even when you're just one person against a system that profits from your silence. Today is my 60th birthday. Marcus and Sarah are coming for dinner, and I'm making my mother's recipe for peach cobbler. I never had time to cook when I was working 2 jobs and sending money I couldn't spare to people who needed it, but never asked how I was surviving. Now I have time. Time to cook and read and learn and grow. Time to be a person instead of just a pair of hands that clean and serve and apologize. The apartment smells like cinnamon and possibility. I think about that 14-year-old girl who saw my bruises and asked the question that changed everything. I wonder if she knows what her compassion set in motion, how 3 simple words, "Are those bruises?" cracked open a silence that had been suffocating me for years. Maybe you're watching this while taking a break from your own invisible job. Maybe you're cleaning an office while everyone else sleeps, or caring for someone else's children while your own wonder when you're coming home. Maybe you've learned to make yourself small, to swallow your needs, to be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity people are willing to throw your way. I want you to know that your bruises matter, the ones on your body and the ones on your heart. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to take up space in the world without apologizing for breathing. I want you to know that invisible doesn't have to be permanent, that silence isn't always golden, that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. The girl in the silk pajamas asked me if those were bruises, and I couldn't hold back tears because someone had finally seen me. Really seen me. Not just my work or my usefulness, but my humanity. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you ever worked for someone who treated you like you were disposable, or loved someone who took your sacrifices for granted? Tell me in the comments. Share your story. Because when we speak up, when we make ourselves visible, we give permission for others to step out of the shadows too. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. It helps this message reach someone who gives their all behind the scenes and needs to know they're not alone. To keep sharing these emotional journeys, we've created a special podcast with stories equally heartfelt. You can find it here on the left. Thank you for being part of this journey of becoming visible. Thank you for seeing me and for allowing yourself to be seen. I'll see you in the next story.